Why iPhones cost more than Androids, even with worse specs. Stop looking at the spec sheet. Seriously, crumple it up and throw it away, because it is lying to you. If you compare a $1,000 Android phone to a $1,000 iPhone, on paper, Apple gets absolutely embarrassed. The Android phone usually packs double the RAM, a battery big enough to jumpstart a Honda Civic, a screen that refreshes faster than human blinking speed, and a zoom lens that can literally spy on craters on the moon. Yet, year after year, Apple charges a massive premium, refuses to engage in price wars, and millions of people happily hand over their credit cards. Why? Why does a device with objectively worse numbers on a piece of paper cost the same, if not more, than a literal supercomputer wrapped in glass? Because Android manufacturers are selling you components. Apple is selling you something completely different. Today, let's talk about the hidden economics of tech, why worse specs often cost more money, and why Apple's most expensive product isn't actually a piece of hardware at all. Let's start with the biggest number people love to fight about in YouTube comments: RAM. You'll see flagship Android devices proudly boasting 12, 16, or even 24 gigabytes of RAM. Meanwhile, Apple drops a brand new Pro model with 8 gigabytes, calls it a day, and acts like they just revolutionized the world. Tech reviewers scream, Android fans laugh, and the internet makes memes. But here is the dirty little secret of mobile software. Android needs that extra RAM just to keep its eyes open. Think of Android like a massive, beautiful public library. Because Android is an open source operating system, it has to run on thousands of different devices, from a $50 budget phone in India to a $2,000 folding phone in New York. To make that possible, Android relies on a middleman software layer. It essentially uses a process called garbage collection to manage memory, constantly scanning the system to see what apps are running and cleaning up after them. This process is incredibly flexible, but it eats RAM for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Apple, on the other hand, built the building, owns the bricks, and controls who gets to walk through the front door. iOS is custom-tailored specifically for one exact family of microchips, Apple's own silicon. Because the hardware and the software are married in a monogamous relationship, iOS handles memory management like a hyper-efficient accountant. When you close an app on an iPhone, it instantly freezes. No background garbage collection. No middleman translation layer. An iPhone doesn't need 16 gigabytes of RAM because it doesn't waste a single megabyte. So, when you look at that spec sheet, the iPhone isn't worse. It's just fundamentally more efficient. You're paying for optimization, not raw, unoptimized muscle. But software optimization alone doesn't explain why Apple can demand a price premium. To understand the actual cash value of an iPhone, you have to look at what economists call the architecture of retention. Or, to use the phrase the rest of us use, the Apple ecosystem. When you buy an Android phone, you are buying a standalone tool. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but it lives in a silo. When you buy an iPhone, you aren't just buying a phone. You are buying an entry ticket to a highly exclusive digital country club. Think about how Apple builds its features. If you copy a paragraph of text on your iPhone, you can instantly hit paste on your Mac. If you shoot a massive video file, it airdrops to your iPad in 3 seconds without losing quality. If you put your AirPods in your ears, they seamlessly bounce their audio from your laptop to your pocket, depending on which device is ringing. This isn't an accident. It is a beautifully engineered, multi-billion-dollar moat. Apple knows that once you own an Apple Watch, an iPad, and a couple of AirTags, the cost of switching to Android isn't just the sticker price of a new Samsung or Pixel. The real cost is the mental exhaustion of relearning an entire operating system, losing your iMessage groups, and literally throwing away hundreds of dollars of perfectly functional accessories that refuse to play nice with Google. Apple charges more for the hardware because they can. They have built a cage made of pure, unadulterated convenience, and frankly, The velvet lining inside that cage feels too good for most consumers to ever want to leave. Now let's talk about actual cold, hard cash, because this is where the plot really thickens and where the worst spec argument completely falls apart. iPhones hold their value like gold bars. Android phones deprecate like used luxury cars. If you go out today and spend $1,200 on a high-end Android flagship, the literal second you open the box and break the plastic seal, its resale value plummets by roughly 40 to 50%. If you try to trade that same phone back to a carrier 2 years later, they're going to offer you just enough credit to buy a nice pair of shoes. An iPhone, by contrast, routinely holds up to 60 or 70% of its original retail value after 2 full years on the market. Why does this happen? It comes down to long-term software support and fragmentation. When Google releases a major new version of Android, they push it out to the world. But then, Samsung has to take it, modify it for their devices, and test it. Carriers have to approve it. Motorola has to do the same. As a result, software updates roll out like molasses. In fact, if you look at dynamic tracking data across the mobile industry, only a tiny fraction of all active Android devices on Earth are ever running the absolute latest operating system. Apple doesn't have that problem. When a new iOS drops, it hits nearly every active iPhone on the planet at the exact same second. A 3-year-old iPhone still feels like a brand new device because Apple keeps treating it like one. That long-term reliability creates massive demand in the secondary used phone market, which naturally props up the premium price tag of the brand new ones. You aren't just paying for the phone today. You're prepaying for what the phone will still be worth in 2029. Finally, there is a brutal economic reality that app developers and tech companies don't like to talk about out loud globally. Android absolutely dominates the planet. It owns over 70% of the total global market share. It is massive, expansive, and everywhere. But while Android users dominate the population, iOS users dominate the economy. Industry data consistently shows a staggering trend. Even though there are vastly fewer iPhone users worldwide compared to Android, the Apple App Store generates nearly double the total revenue of the Google Play Store every single year. In high-income, premium consumer markets like North America, iOS holds over a 58% dominant share. On average, an individual iPhone user spends over 7 times more per month on apps, premium subscriptions, and digital in-app purchases than the average Android user, because iPhone users are statistically far more willing to open their wallets. Software developers build for iOS first. The apps are smoother. The animations are tailored to the hardware. The features drop months earlier, and the bugs get patched within hours. Apple isn't just selling you glass, aluminum, and a silicon chip. They are charging you a premium to access a high-rent digital neighborhood where everything just works a little bit better because that's where the money is. So, let's bring it back to the original question. Does Android give you more hardware, more raw horsepower, and better numbers for your dollar? Absolutely. If you want cutting-edge screen technology, complete customization, and crazy camera sensors, you should buy an Android phone. But Apple has proven a fundamental truth about human psychology. Consumers don't buy megahertz. They don't buy gigabytes, and they don't care about spec sheets. They buy ecosystem unity, peace of mind, high resale value, and predictable simplicity. And until an Android manufacturer can replicate that exact feeling, Apple will keep charging a premium, and we will happily keep paying it. Let me know down in the comments. Are you team spec sheet or team ecosystem? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that subscribe button if you want more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.